My name is Peter Ochs from Wichita, Kansas. I grew up in a small town in central Kansas called Hoisington, Kansas. It was a town of about 4,000 people. My dad was a farmer and my mother was a school teacher. Probably at 4 or 5 years of age, I'd go to the farm with my dad, and it was part of being an Ochs. And the understanding was that if you worked hard and were honest, you'd be successful. And at the age of 40, I woke up and I realized I'd been successful. I'd been financially successful, but I was not satisfied. There was something missing in my life that I knew I needed to look at life differently and to change what I was doing. I love to build things. One, I think I was just born with those inclinations, but I think also coming from a farm, you have very little money, and when things go wrong, you just have to fix them. You have to figure out how to fix them for the least amount of money as quickly as you can. And then during the off season, of course, we were fixing equipment, we were building sheds, we were doing all these kinds of things. I just grew up with that, and I just love to build things.
We've been married for 39 years. We met here in Wichita, introduced by a good friend of Pete's, and working in Young Life together. When I married Pete, he was a banker, had banker's hours. It was great, but he told me all along that when he turned 30, he was going to be an entrepreneur and own his own business. We had 2 kids, one and a new baby on the way. At 30, he left a well-paying job and started his own business.
So I started a little investment banking company, and we were the middleman between the buyer and the seller in privately held companies. 6 or 7 years into that, we made our first acquisition. It was a small community bank. About every year, we would acquire a different company. So through the 90s, we had great success in buying businesses, growing them, and then flipping them. After 9/11, our business dropped 50%. And I looked at God and I said, "Don't you understand what I've done for you?" And he said, "Pete, I don't want your money. I want your heart." With that revelation, I said, I'm really going to do business differently. So the first thing I said was, if we are going to impact people, what are the things that people need? And what would that business look like? And it really centers around 3 things that we all have to have. One is food, clothing, and shelter. It's called economic capital. So we needed to make money. The second thing we all need is all the stuff money can't buy. I call that social capital. It's the things that we do for the common good. And the last thing we need is a moral code by which to live. We need to know what's right and wrong, and we call that spiritual capital. Several years ago, we came on a business that was struggling, and we thought was going to be an easy opportunity for us to apply these new principles of creating economic, social, and spiritual capital. So we were excited about this new business and being able to launch it with this new philosophy of running a triple bottom line company. The name of this company is Seat King, and we build industrial seating. And the seat is basically made of 3 components: steel, some type of cushioning device or foam, and then a fabric covering. It's located in a relatively small town, and there's not a great employee pool. So when we were looking to reposition this business and move it, we figured out that the prison has 1,800 employees A lot of them are looking for something to do.
This was a new thing for us. We had never had a business in a prison before. The first time I went to the prison and heard those gates slam behind me, your heart skips a beat. You're like, this is for real.
I remember that first day, the gates are clanging, and I just kept thinking to myself, there's no way that we're going to be able to operate a business in this environment. If I'm dead honest with you, it was a 100% business deal. Here was a good, steady workforce. They showed up on time. And I went in there purely because I did not have enough employees to fulfill my needs outside the prison. So I said, well, let's give these guys a try.
I got locked up when I was just barely turned 17. I've been here 22 years now. When I first came here, it was hard, you know, and I got in a lot of trouble. A lot of people still don't feel I deserve this chance that I have now, because this is a unique opportunity to have a job like this. I mean, especially being behind the walls of a maximum security prison. Out of, I think there's 1,100 of us here, only 30 of us have it. Well, thankfully, I've been able to do everything there. I've assembled, I've glued, and now I'm a welder. So they've taught me all those skills, which I had no clue, you know, about any of that stuff. You know, I don't want to leave behind a legacy of just being a murderer. You know, I'm gonna make an impact when I get out. I'm an artist, and that's my goal in life, to not just be this.
Even though we had this philosophy, I think in the back of my mind, I just viewed them as an asset. But it didn't take very many months, and I saw them as people. They were people with the same needs, same stresses, same problems, and maybe even more.
I've never had a job like this in my life, or job at all in my life, and I'm making better money than a lot of people on the streets. It blows my mind. Even though we're locked up, you're not treated like an inmate. We're human beings, and they treat you like that. It's employees. I'm learning how to talk to people, presentation, how you carry yourself, things to be successful in society. I'm just learning the proper steps to when I do leave here, that I won't be tempted to turn back to the streets.
We probably owned the business for maybe a year, and we needed a big vision for these guys to grab onto. The vision we cast for them was this: we want to have the best prison in the United States of America. And to have the best prison, we need to have the best prisoners. We need to have the best inmates. They looked at me like I was some kind of a man from outer space.
We thought he was crazy. This guy, he's, you know, at first, that's what we thought, you know. And even though that it was a goal that I thought was unattainable, little by little, he's getting there, and I'm starting to see it. You know, so he's proving to me and to the rest of us that, man, if you set your heart to something, if you really fight for it, and if, you know, you're focused on it, it can happen.
We had the theoretical model of economic, social, and spiritual capital. But I'll have to tell you that when we went inside the prison and saw the desert that place was, it absolutely opened our eyes up as to what the possibilities could be. Every couple of weeks we have what we call a life lesson. It may be how to be a good father, lessons on finance, being innovative, being disciplined in your approach to business. And then you become an expert, you become innovative, you become disciplined, And pretty soon you say, you know, life's not about me, it's living for something greater than me. And you guys can live for something greater than you, even though you're in a pretty desperate place at times. In one of our life lessons, we presented this whole concept of generosity and challenged them that we would match dollar for dollar any dollar that they gave to one of a number of charities, and we gave them a list. It was amazing the amount of monies that these prisoners gave to charity, and most of the charities that they gave to existed to help the victims of the crime that they committed.
Everyone is in prison because they don't know how to make good decisions. And the overwhelming majority of the guys in there continue to make bad decisions. As a matter of fact, they get better at making bad decisions. So I spent my first 10 years as gang fights in prison, in and out of segregation. To cope with it, I smoked weed to not even think about what I'd done. I was fortunate enough to where my family came to visit me. I had a dirty UA. I failed a UA, and they took my visitation. And my little brother at the time was just devastated because I was in handcuffs behind glass, and he didn't understand why I couldn't play with him. Normally, we'd go out there and wrestle around, and my mother told me, she said, it's okay, you can do whatever you want with your life. She said, but we come up here to visit you. We could be doing other things as a family, but we decided to come to prison and visit you, and this is how you repay us. And I felt about this big. I was like, man, what am I doing? You know, what am I doing? I seen the hurt in my little brother's eyes. And at that time, he was maybe 3 years old. All I wanted to do was get out and be a part of my little brother's life. And that was the beginning. When I had my job at Seat King, I started hanging around more people that knew how to make pretty good decisions, because to have that job, you couldn't get in any trouble. The single most important thing that they showed us was respect. And I seen that's what made Seat King different. A bunch of my friends would say, why are you hanging around that white dude? And it was like, why would he want to hang around someone like me? Here I am, like I said, I'm an ex-gang member, I'm a murderer, I'm in prison with a life sentence. Why would he even want to take a chance with me? And that had a huge impact on my life. They would come, I think it was on Wednesdays, to teach life lesson classes. And I started really paying attention to those. I said, man, that's what I want. That's what I want for my life.
So let me just tell you guys, I'm not the inspiration to you, you're the inspiration to us. Just keep doing what's right, okay? One of the criticisms that we've received is that, oh, you just moved into the prison because it's cheap labor. Well, if you are an inmate and work for the state of Kansas, you'll make approximately 50 cents a day. We pay our inmates what is considered fair market value. In fact, we don't even set the wage for the inmate. The state of Kansas will do that. Our goal is to be a virtuous company, and we can't be a virtuous company unless we have virtuous people. We can't have virtuous people unless I'm a virtuous leader. As an entrepreneur, I'd love to have my son come back and get into business with me. And that's happened. He graduated from college with a degree in business, and I told him he couldn't come back and work for me right away. So he went out and made his own way in the world for 9 years before he came back. What he learned in those 9 years, I don't think I could have taught him.
I feel like I've had a ministry heart and a business head. He was over here, and he started to slide towards the middle as the triple bottom line business model really grew in his mind and practically in our business. I think to minister is simply to serve.
You know, I can tell you the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but on the other hand, we're really different. I'm a ready, fire, aim kind of guy. He's a ready, aim, fire guy.
It's a huge rate of family businesses that don't make it into the second generation. Very few make it into the third, and almost none make it into the fourth generation. We spent some time with the counselor working through who I was, who my dad was. It helped us count the cost, right? Just to understand who we were and what we were kind of getting into. Probably one of the best things we did was when I first came into the business, I didn't work for my dad. I actually worked my way up through the business. Everyone understands that in a business where your main goal is to create economic capital, you'll have all sorts of friction points. The push comes when we know that we are really the only job opportunity most of those men will have. And so you don't know if they are more intent on playing the game and having a facade and hiding behind wanting to be a good employee, or if they're really serious about being a contributor. And so I think over time, we get to understand who those guys are, and your fruit always comes to the surface at the end of the day. Excellence is a high standard. It flushes those ulterior motives out when you aren't performing because you don't have the competence to do it, or because you don't have the commitment to do it, or the character to do it. That helps bring those things to the forefront, and I think we're able to catch those. And it's almost more destructive to have someone in a role that they don't really fit in. One of the other tensions that arises from a triple bottom line business is sometimes you want to get more involved than you should. If it's just economics, you keep everybody at an arm's distance. And so it's very professional, it's very business oriented. And so when you start to build deeper relationships socially and spiritually, you start to let that guard down. I'm all for changing the world, but for me, I think my world starts with everyone that's around me.
See where we need to go from here, but we need to throw a party first. Looking forward to it. Good to see you. Proud of you, really proud of you. Thanks. Great accomplishment.
Running a triple bottom line business sounds terrific. And in theory, it is. In practice, it's difficult. It is very difficult. And it's difficult because you're dealing with people. And there are times when I just say, I want to give up.
To help you think through that business.
Just recently, we had a gentleman that worked for us, had been in prison 47 years, and was getting out. So we hired him, put him to work on the outside. I think he was out there for 3 months, and then he failed, and he's back in prison. It's very, very tough for these guys. And at times, you'll go 2 steps backwards and maybe 1 step forward. So it's a bit discouraging, but you can never give up, never give up.
And in order for a person to come into prison and jails and want to change, you gotta want it. These people can't give it to you. It's like leading a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I mean, prison, it's no good. Prison ain't no good. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. But sometimes people need it. Here I am 37 years later, finally growing up as a man. I could finally make my parents proud. I mean, just heard the other day on the phone and talked to my mom, and she's finally proud I'm becoming a man. I'm a man.
In the 90s, I had a very different philosophy of business than I have now. Back then, it was a philosophy that everybody had. Buy a business, put as little down as you can, leverage it, make as much money, and flip it. There were times where I put excessive stress on Deb because I was doing my thing, and I kind of left her with the home and the kids. You can literally get sucked into the exhilaration of running a business. At least I did. I would say for a year or two, I've justified my hard work saying I was doing it for them. But if I'm really honest about it, it was just as much for myself as it was for them.
The reality was he was gone a lot. Everybody wanted something from him yesterday.
So after a couple of years, Deb came to me and said, time out. So I agreed to not work on Sundays and to only work a half a day on Saturdays. And within 30 or 60 days, our business literally picked up and doubled, and it was incredible. And I think the lesson God was teaching me there was one of faith.
And I think God's given many women a good intuition, and when that time comes to have a concern, we need to speak up. I look at myself as a partner with Pete in business.
Starting a business, having kids, all of those pressures are excruciating. If you're not well-grounded, particularly in your faith, and not well-grounded with additional friends and mentors that we could talk to, it wouldn't have been nearly as good as it was. I was fortunate enough 20 years ago to run into 3 other entrepreneurs wanting to do business differently. One of the fellows that was in our group was Jess Carell. As we had gotten to know each other over the years, Jess suggested, hey, why don't you guys come and join my board? It'll be a reason for us to get together every quarter. One, we can talk business, but then we can encourage each other in this whole life of stewardship.
I just have always loved that he thinks he's supposed to be part of the solution for anything the Lord puts in front of his path that needs fixing.
Pete has always been philosophically driven. He's very much like a typical type A business person on the one hand, and on the other hand, you can tell how meaningful it is to him to see people's lives improved by his business.
The money is just a side benefit of a business. So now all of a sudden you have to figure out, well, what's the business all about?
I became very fascinated in how these guys operate their businesses. And we would talk very intentionally about why we were doing what we were doing, how we were doing it, what could we learn from one another.
It was just the same 3 things. What's the economic impact, what's social impact, and what's the spiritual impact? I think it's the natural question, the natural filter for every decision in business to go through. You know, it pleases your economics teacher and pleases your Sunday school teacher.
And I think one of the things that pulled us all together, at some point in time, we understood we weren't the owners, we were the stewards. We began to challenge each other. 1, what does that look like? And 2, how should we live differently as stewards?
The most important thing I do for our business is to go off and hang out with these other guys because I get a window into their world, their way of operating. I can learn from these other guys.
I believe us moving into the prison was not for Pete to help the inmates, but for the inmates to help Pete.
There's a saying I love. A man's true character will define itself in the face of adversity. I proved myself when I finally got parole. You know, I'm out here free now. And I'll tell you what, the air does smell different out here than in there. For me, it was very important for my family to see my sincerity, because I know in the back of my mind, they were like, all right, well, he's probably gonna mess up here pretty soon, you know, and I don't just wanna talk about it. I wanna show them with my actions. I wanna build that trust with them. And that was one of the life skills that they were teaching us, you know, the trust, integrity. They wanted us to see us be better people, not just financially, but also with the life skills that you'll need out here. I'm not like super religious, but I tell you what, if I were to ever say that I met a Christian in my life, it's more than definitely Pete. He wouldn't even have to tell you that's what he is. You just know it. All right, ready? Sit pretty. Good girl. Pete did something for us in prison. I tell you what, I'll never, ever forget, and I was so grateful and thankful for it. Our family got to actually go into the prison. And this is still hard to fathom. We had a barbecue in prison, a barbecue, all right? And our family got to enjoy time with us for, I think it was like 3 hours. But I got to throw a football around with my little brother. I got to sit down and eat with my parents. They were feeding our families, and I'll never forget that. All I wanted to do was get out and be a part of my little brother's life. Two days after I made parole, that I got the decision, my little brother was killed. My little brother that got killed was the one I threw the football with. Sorry. My little brother, both of my little brothers were a big reason why I wanted to change my life around. It helped open up my eyes to how good people can be. And even now that I'm out, even though I'm not working for him any longer, he still takes time to check up on me, and not just me, my family. I'll probably never be as successful as him, but if I can even be there just a little bit, it would make my life so much better. And not just money-wise, but I mean just with family. I seen the way his son respected him and the way he looked at his father. I'd be like, man, I wish I would have looked at my father that way. I've been drawing since I was a kid, but while I was in prison, I remember I told myself, I said, you know, if you're gonna have to do this time, you better be the best artist you can be. Tattooing opened so many doors for me, but for me, it was a passion. Probably for me, one of the most fulfilling things is when someone comes to me and they want to cover up, you know, and they're like, man, I messed up, can you cover this for me? And when I can cover it for them, that gives me a sense of pride. Portraits, that's what I specialize in, doing portraits. And you have to be spot on those. Most of the time that people get them, it's usually a memorial. One of the hardest ones I've done now is a lot of my family's been wanting memorials for my little brother. We're gonna live a good life, you know, and I'm excited about that.
I'm so proud of that guy for getting out and his desire to help people and really change.
You really love these guys.
I do. As a young man, I grew up memorizing the catechism. And the first question of the Westminster Catechism is, what's man's chief end? And as a sixth grader, I learned the answer to that, and it's to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And while that has been a pat answer of mine for 55 years, I think over the last 10 years, that's really become meaningful. To do things that I wouldn't normally do, and then to see God show up, your faith just wells up. You can take more risk if you understand who the true owner is, but it takes a different way of looking at business. If you go back to the garden, the first thing God did was had these people work. Work is fundamental. It's fundamental to human flourishing. To create a business where you can flourish economically and then have these other benefits creates an environment that is very powerful.
I think the change that took place in our life was when we started looking at life as ministry. When we look at business, okay, how can we encourage other people in this business? When we realized what our real purpose was, there was a unity and a joy that we had together that we maybe didn't have in those early years. But when our focus changed to what we were actually called to do, and we understood that calling, then we could go forward. And we found joy in that.
Yeah.